All right, here we go. Number 2 for the day. Remember, same thing. Start it over again. Print it out. Do the problem. Take a picture of it. Send it to me if you want to. I would love to see how you guys are doing. Don't be embarrassed about it. You send me your work. It probably gives me the better chance and opportunity to know what you need help with. So send these to me. Let's get the best practice, okay? After you're done doing all of that stuff, unpause this video or come back to it and let's see how you did. But please don't just watch these videos to watch me do them. Make sure you are doing it on your own. All right, let's get it. Okay, so here we go. Hopefully you guys did a good job. Let's actually see. Okay, we're used to these problems, so hopefully we're okay. It says let g of x, f is defined by a function on the closed interval, -2 to 6. It's consisting of 5 line segments that is shown to the right. Okay, g of x is from -1 to x. Okay, so what's g of 2? All right, let's see if we remember how to do these guys. G of 2 would be equal to the integral from -1 to 2, and that is going in order. So it's important to know that that is going in order. So from -1 to 2. Well, here we have a triangle, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1. So that'd be -3 because it's 1/2 base times height. And then I'm going to go all the way to 2, which is that's 2 by 1. So that'd just be ichi. So that means if I add those two together, my first answer should be -2. Okay, and that would have been worth a point. So hopefully you were able to get that right. Now remember, this is asking g prime of 2. So first we have to find g prime of x. And g prime of x is I'm going to take the derivative of an antiderivative. So that's just going to be f of x. So that means g prime of 2 is simply equal to f of 2. F of 2 is just what is the value? And the value is ichiban. It's 1. And that would be worth a point. So far you're 2 of 2. Hopefully you got those. Remember, on any type of question where you should get it right, really make sure you're taking your time. And my guess is you should have probably gotten both of those correct, all right? Okay, let's keep rolling. B, find the average rate of change of G from 0 to 6. So average rate of change, remember, would be G of 6, minus G of 0 all over 6 minus 0. Well, G of 6, well, what's G of 6? Well, G of 6 would be, guys. Go away. G of 6 would be the integral from -1 to 6 of my function. So that'd be the area underneath the curve. Okay, this right here was -3. We did that. Well, from here to here, all the way to 5, we have a triangle, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 2, a height of 2. So that'd be 5. And then we got to go all the way to 6, though. And that's 1 by 1. So that'd be -1/2. So if you add up all of those guys together for G of 6, I get 1.5 or 3/2. Okay? Minus G of 0. Well, what the heck is G of 0? Well, G of 0 is just the integral from -1 to 0. Once again, still going in order. Important to know that those limits are in order. From -1 to 0. Okay, that's that. We already said that was -3. Okay, so we get a little that, right, class? Because we're going to subtract it, and then that's all over 6 minus 0, which would be 3/2 plus 3, which is 6 over 2, which would be 9 over 2, which would be 9 over 12, which would be 3/4. Okay, and looking up here, wow. For that one here, this teacher, this master calc teacher says that'd only be worth a point. How about that? I think it probably would be worth 2. Okay, the next one asks for a point of inflection of G from -2 to 2. Okay, well, point of inflection for G would be the second derivative of G. Well, the first derivative of G would just be that. The second derivative of G would be f prime. So remember, we're going to do a sign analysis because they're asking me for a point of inflection. So sign analysis would be, what are the critical points? Okay, critical points would be, okay, since we're dealing with the slopes, when the slopes would be 0 or D and E. So here I'm going to look for corners or cusps. So I have one at -1, Okay, anywhere else? Where else do I have at 0? And then it does say just to go from -2 to 2. Okay, so I think I'm done there because the next corner happens at 4 and then there is one at 5. If I wanted to get like cray, F prime stands for the slopes. So the slopes are negative, then they go positive, then they stay positive, then they go negative, then they go negative. And we all know that a point of inflection only occurs when the second derivative changes signs. Changes signs there. And that is the only time that it changes signs from -2 to 2. It actually does change signs there, but they're asking just from -2 to 2. So remember, it's best to always use what they give you. So your best reason here is that there's a P of I, and make sure you write out point of inflection, at x equals -1 because F changes from decreasing to increasing, right? That's what happens with the slopes. And remember, that would be the best way of describing it. You could also talk in terms of second derivative, okay? You could say the second derivative changes from negative to positive. Okay, remember, AP loves it when you use what they give you, but the second derivative information would work as well, and that would be worth 2 puntos, okay? So far you could have a total of 5. Not bad so far if you really think about it. You could have got 5 just right there. All right, let's keep rolling. Oh my gosh, we're already on D. Find the absolute minimum value of G. Well, if they're asking us for a max or min of G, that means we're going to take the derivative of G, and the derivative of G is just F. And so we need critical points. Critical points are whenever it's equal to 0 or D and E. So when would the first derivative be equal to 0 or D and E? It would be whenever the function is equal to 0 or D and E, which happens at 0 and at 5. Only 2 spots, sweetie sweets. Okay, and if we look here, it's negative, then it turns positive, then it turns negative. So that means the actual graph will look like this. It will decrease, then it will increase, then it will decrease. So you could have a min there, but you also could have a min right there. So there's 2 possible minimums we could have. The minimums could happen at, right? Where could they happen at? They could happen when x is 0 or x is, what would it be, 6, okay, at the very end. So remember, the best way to do this is with your table of values that we'd want to pick, right? So we have x and we have g of x, okay? And you know what? I always tell you in class to check the endpoint, so you could put a -2, a 0, and a 6. You wouldn't really have to, okay? But if you did -2, you would get a positive value. And you guys probably did this because I always would have you check endpoints in class because it always helps for justification. But if I was to find g of -2, that'd be the integral from -1 to -2, which is backwards. So remember, you should actually flip that to be the negative of -2 to -1, which that would be, right? We all know, we're just going -2 to -1. So that would be an area of 2. That would be an area of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that'd be an area of 2. So that's a total of 4. So it'd be -4, which would be 4. Okay? G of 0, did we find G of 0 earlier? G of 0 would be -1 to 0. And my area from -1 to 0, does it erase? It was supposed to maybe erase. Let's check it out. Oh, shooty shoots. It's not erasing it. Okay, it's supposed to. But let me see if I hit that. Oh, sweetie sweets. All right, from -1 to 0 would be this area right here, which we already found to be -3. And then we did G of 6, didn't we? I feel like we did G of 6 in a piece. Oh, and we did. We did it back here in the average rate of change, and I think it was 3/2. But you can easily see that your and make sure you answer it. Absolute minimum value is a Y answer. So the absolute minimum value is -3, and it occurs when x is equal to 0. Okay, and on this one, that was worth 3 points. It says they gave you a point for testing 0 as a candidate, a point for testing 6 as a candidate, and 1 point for your final answer. So you wouldn't have to test that other endpoint as long as you had the work that showed those could be your only two possibilities, okay? Now let's do E. E is probably going to be the toughest one, right? It comes last. Let's see how you guys did. It just says, does H have a min or max at x equals 2? Well, the only way it could have a min or max is if the derivative was equal to 0. So let's find the derivative of h prime of x, which would be x times the derivative, right? This is a little product rule. So they're testing our knowledge of the product rule. So there we go. So let's do h prime of 2. And let's see. Let's hope it's not 0, because if it's not 0, I'm donezo. Okay, there we go. What would that be equal to? What's g prime of 2? Well, g prime of 2 would just be f of 2. And I think we maybe did this earlier, but what's f of 2? F of 2 is ichi. So it's a 1 right there. And then g of 2, gosh, I feel like we did this earlier. G of 2, and we did do it earlier. I'm looking at my notes here because I have the answer. Okay, but g of 2 was negative 2. Oh, so we do get 0. Check. That means there could be a min or max there. Now remember, we can't really do sign analysis here. It would cause way too much work. So what we would do instead is we would use the second derivative, remember, to help us out. So let's go ahead and find the second derivative, which if you're doing the second derivative, that part is a product rule, which is x times the derivative of g prime, which is g double prime, plus the derivative of x, which is 1 times g prime of x, right? That is just the product rule for that, remember, plus 1 times g of x. Well, that's just g prime of x. So now we're going to plug in a 2. Why am I going to plug in a 2? Because remember, the second derivative tells me about concavity. So that's 2 times g double prime of 2 plus, look at that. I have 2 of those guys. So I'm going to make it easier on my own self. There we go. Well, g double prime of 2 would be equal to f prime of 2. F prime of 2 stands for what is the slope at x equals 2? And the slope of x equals 2 is 1/2. Okay, and I got that just by looking at the slope up there. Okay, which is EG plus 2 g prime of 2. What is g prime of 2? Well, we did that earlier, right? G prime of 2 is just f of 2, right? G prime of 2 is just f of 2, and f of 2 is just the value up there, right? And that's just EG. So if I do that, I get 3, which is positive. Well, if it's positive, then that means it's concave up. And guess what? We learned from the first derivative, when it equaled 0, that value right there has to be x equals 2. Why? Because you have a horizontal tangent. You have a derivative that's 0. So class, would that be a minimum or would it be a maximum? And you are right. That would have to be a minimum. How did I know that? Well, I knew that because the second derivative was positive. And if the second derivative is positive, then that means it's concave up. And since there's a critical point there, it's got to be a relative minimum. Okay, let me go ahead and show you guys the answers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that one was shorter. So once again, the AP is still figuring all this out. Are they going to have you do the 2 problems and then send them both at once? I don't know. Okay, we're not totally sure yet. So make sure you're just working with each. And did it take about 22.5 minutes for both of those problems? If it did, then you're pretty good to go. There is your scoring. Okay? And it's all right there. Go ahead and hit pause if you need to. Aloha bohas. It's Judgment Week. All right? How did you do? 5 or better is money. If you're dominating these, then you should be feeling pretty darn good about yourself. Keep on making those videos that you are doing. Alohas!